everyone, and welcome to SplineBomb's Game of Thrones podcast. I'm Matt from SplineBomb. Helping me out is Sigmund Payne, animator and SplineBomb contributor. We have Mika Hero, animator and winner of Game of Thrones Facebook competition. And guests joining us today are senior animator Ingo Schachner and animation supervisor Chris Stenner. Both have been animating on the Dragons since Game of Thrones Season 2. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play Game of Thrones clips, and then after that we will maybe discuss a couple of shots on there's a lot of public questions about reference, acting and workflow, and then maybe you could pick one or two shots and really get in a bit of detail and talk about how you guys did the shots.
Okay, cool. That felt a little bit like my life was flashing before my eyes.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's the same. You wouldn't think it's like 3 years in that short clip.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always amazing, you know, because we've just finished animating these scenes and sequences, and then they're already being aired, and then you watch them, and even though, you know, you've just finished working on them, you're surprised on how quick the sequence is over compared to on how long it felt to actually animate them.
Yeah. So I'm guessing in that whole sequence there's a good mix of what Ingo and yourself worked on. We could start with some reference, because that's where you would start from anyway. What I'm going to do is I'll paste them there so we have them. So these are the reference questions. So one of them was, I would like to ask how they get reference if they combine natural lizards and human acting, and of course if they can have one. I guess one would be more maybe you guys doing acting, I'm not really sure. Also dragons.
I thought she was asking whether she can have one of the dragons.
Must be expensive to post.
We could Dropbox the rig, Chris.
Yeah, I'm sure no one would mind.
Yeah, of course.
It's old, they're not going to use it anyway.
Yeah, no, if that was the intention of the question, then the answer would be unfortunately a clear no.
Okay. I'll let her know that. I won't tell her that we all got one each though.
I don't know, Ingo, do you want to go first? Or?
Go ahead, I mean, you have actually kind of sift through all the reference mostly, since we're supervising. I usually got like the folder and just went for it.
Yeah, you know, there's yeah, I guess there's different kinds of references that we use, you know. References are really super important for all the aspects of the dragons, and you know, of course, when we first start out, we look at a lot of stuff from YouTube, and we Google images, and yes, we are actually combining references from several animals, not so much humans, but that comes in then later in the other kind of reference, and that's sort of the acting reference that, you know, sometimes we're not always shoot references for individual shots in our office. You know, it's that can be very helpful, you know, if the client asks for a certain action or want to try out certain ideas to actually play them out in front of the camera. It's, like I say, it's not something we do for every shot, but for the trickier shots, it can be very helpful to figure out timings and body dynamics and things like this. And I think in regards to the reference from the animal world, I would say mostly we were looking at lizards, like you say, but for season 4, as the dragons are so big, we were looking at crocodiles and other predators. You know, we were looking at lions. We were, for the flying shots, we were looking at eagles and condors, picking up mountain goats, and you know, you just sort of like study all of that, and then, you know, rather than trying to copy a single reference, you sort of try and put in the pieces that interest you from each reference. And yeah, in my eyes, that's what makes the animation, the craft of animation fun. You know, you're not just copying frame by frame anything that we find somewhere. We're actually just, you know, using it for inspiration more than as a one-to-one reference.
Yeah, actually.
I don't know, would you agree, Ingo, or?
Yeah, actually, now that you're mentioning it.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's basically what I did as well. I mean, I studied the behavior of the animals, and, you know, to get the feeling right, but I never really copied it. You know, maybe pick one or two like movements out that I find like really that fit the shot or something, but I don't copy. Basically, it's just like I usually in the beginning of a show, I sit down, go through the reference for like a day or something, and then just freshen it up once in a while. But then I just really rely on something I know. That's the fun part, like you said, because copying, everybody can copy. That's boring.
So since you use that as a base, would you sketch out a lot of the movements?
No, well, no, not really. I'm not a sketcher, but sometimes, like if I want like certain shapes that I get that like my supervisor wants or something like this, just to keep in mind for them, I do like a little mind library, but that's all. I'm generally not much of a shooting reference. Like Chris said, I don't really act out stuff, especially for creature stuff. I don't.
Okay.
Were you also inspired by other movies with dragons?
Yeah, it was one shot. I think we used, especially in the beginning, they were talking about the Dragon Slayer movie from Disney.
Yeah.
Just because it was like this very old school puppet kind of thing, but it has this really menacing, like dangerous lizard kind of feel to it. So we got it more for inspiration. It wasn't like a copy or anything we could use, something, maybe just some poses. But yeah, we used a couple of them.
So Chris, you would actually act out the dragon in a shot to get a feel for the timing and what's going to happen?
Well, not so much at the start, you know. I think that's more something that happens as the animation progresses. You know, as we have animation dailies, and you know, we're sitting in front of a blocking or you know a rough animation or something like this, and then sometimes it's just easier to sort of get off the chair and sort of you know show how you want a certain move played out or. Yeah, that's also the point when you know we start sketching on top of the play blast to sort of like work out positions and wing shapes and all things like this.
And would you actually film yourself acting something like that out and then analyze it, or do you just you know act it out to get a feel?
Yeah, yeah, like I said in the like I said before, I think that's very much up to like personal preference. Some animators really sort of love to do that, and they're always filming themselves and before they start animating. I think in season 4 there was only 1 or 2 shots where there was actually a shot being filmed in reference, and that was in this what we just saw in episode 10 when the dragons turn round and they want to rush after Danny, but then they get kind of trapped by the chains that they're wearing, and there actually the other supervisor and one of the animators got down on the floor on all fours, and they had ropes around their shoulders, and they were really sort of like you know rushing forward and throwing themselves into these ropes.
Can we see that?
Actually quite fun to look at. Yeah, but like Ingo, I'm not so much of a filming myself as a reference kind of animator. I'm sort of more looking at the model and trying to figure out what makes sense with the model, what shapes work well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think in general, like filming yourself for reference like this is just like it's if it's a really complicated move, like in that special sequence and shot, it made sense because there was so much energy and interaction stuff like this going, and the other supervisor had like an idea how he wanted to play it, and it makes sense to shoot it. To have like a good base, like get something out of it, because in shots like this, you can make so many different versions. And sometimes there's just no time to do that many versions, so it's faster just to shoot it and get it down and show it and work from there than actually just do it like me and Chris do. So it really depends on the shot.
And so now that you said like with regards to time and stuff that you have to do the shots, what kind of notes would you get like when you get the plates? Like, do you get direction of where the director wants the dragons to fly in, or do you kind of see the composition yourself and bring the dragons in as a blocking pass and then look for reference after that?
Usually there's a call for when we get the plates turned over. There's 1 or 2 calls where we get a briefing from the clients. But it's more about the action that takes place in the shots rather than really specific. It's all starting vague, and then it starts to become more clear as we go along.
Okay.
I mean, we do get told how many dragons are in the shot and whereabouts they are, but they don't really tell us what they should look like or how they should be sitting or flying or anything like that. That's, after we present the first round of blockings, that we start to go into more detail about how the action should look. But we basically, we talk about what beats need to be told in each shot and when certain things should happen, and go from there.
Okay, so you do get that kind of artistic freedom to choose the whole line of action of how the dragon comes in and stuff, which is quite nice, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
Unless you told to redo the shot after.
Guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you just hold for a second? I just found out my battery's running out. I'll be back in a second. I'm so sorry.
Ah, cool, no problem.
Okay, I'll be back in a second. I'm sorry.
All right.
All right.
So Chris, I mean, apparently that could be a good thing or a bad thing that a shot kind of develops together with the client while you work on it. So is it more that you say it's awesome that you have a lot of freedom and you can do your own thoughts and put your own creativity into it and see what the client thinks? Or is that one of those things where you do a blocking and the client goes, no, like, I want this to be different, and then you do a different thing and the client goes like, oh yeah, that's closer, but can you make it completely different once more? Is it one of those awesome freedom kind of things, or is it one of those back and forth until you kind of touch what the client wants?
That's when it stops being awesome, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I would have to say it's on this particular project. I wouldn't call it the awesome freedom, to be honest. There's other projects where you got definitely more freedom than here, because here we're working on a really sort of tight schedule, and things have to be turned around and turned over very quickly. So it's not like, we get the plates and then they say, all right, guys, go off and play around with the dragons for 3 weeks and then show us what you got, and then we'll talk about it, and you get another 3 weeks to try something else. We do have to sort of like, also at the first time at the briefings, we ask questions and we try to already pick the client's brain to find out as much as possible what kind of images he wants and what he imagines. And but even then it doesn't mean that after the first briefing you know exactly what he wants, and the first version you present is what he'll be happy with. It's kind of like, especially with the time frame, it's like, everyone is trying to get the most out of the little time we have in animating these shots.
How much do you have to animate per day? How much do you have to animate per day?
We don't actually have a particular quota. We don't have you have to have 2 seconds finished per day or anything like that. We try and sort of hand out the shots to the individual artists so that everyone's got a similar kind of workload, and it's all manageable.
Sorry, Ingo, I muted you there while you were connecting your laptop, but it's not giving me the option to bring you back. Can you try from your end?
How about now?
Oh yeah, okay, cool.
You're back.
Yes, I have returned. Fucking battery. All right.
Cool. So yeah, that's pretty clear of reference. I know everyone's very curious about how you guys do this stuff, and now that you mention it, you can see all the elements where you get them from, like the lizards, and the tail. The tail, it didn't come to my mind. You'd use crocodile tails till you actually mentioned it, and it makes a lot of sense, especially for that last sequence, the 10 you were talking about.
Actually, the crocodile was more about how they would attack the goats and how they would kind of like go for biting into the goat. You know,
Okay.
There's some really cool references of really violent references actually of crocodiles attacking deers and things like this.
Okay.
More going for the viciousness and the violence of those.
Yeah, I imagine you can just, buy a goat and go to the local zoo and toss it into the crocodile cave. Pretend it's for work. Actually, that would be a good reference.
We'll try that on the weekend.
That's the do as well, because it's for work.
No animals were harmed during the production.
Some of them.
Well, that's not true, Chris. Remember, we actually dissected a chicken at one point in season 2.
Yeah, but that was actually dead already.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's also like,
ask a question. Why did you dissect the chicken?
The thing with the reference question is kind of interesting because it's also like all based on like experience by now. Because me and Chris we like did all that homework already in season 2 and then season 3 and season 4. So we already have a library of things that we know the client wanted the characters to move. So it's always like when I say like what reference to use, it's like we have already like an idea how those animals move, and then over the seasons, you get just a feeling how they would move, and they just get heavier sometimes, and there's some different aspects in it. But you have the overall idea what's going to happen and how the characters are through the seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So about that heaviness, what was your main point of reference for the weight of those dragons? Because on one side they're huge and they're super heavy, at least from the last season, and on the other side they're so powerful and so strong. So what was how did you think about animating the weight of those creatures?
I kind of stuck with tigers, to be honest. Like that was one of the reference for me, just personally, because those things, they can be really heavy, but they're also very powerful. And I didn't like took reference how they walk or something. It was more like the quality of movement.
Oh, okay.
Because they can be really fast, but they're also very heavy. This is a balance. I think.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you apply your animation principles. Everyone knows how, or hopefully knows how to make walk have weight. And then you play with the timings and with how much weight shift and body dynamics, or how much of it you dial into your animation, yeah. Basically, that's also like a point that gets discussed a lot with the client, at one point it's like, they should be really fast and agile, and then another point it's like, yeah, but they should weigh a ton, so if they start moving, it's very hard to stop them moving again and stuff,
Majestic.
It's all a process.
Yeah.
Cool. I guess we can now maybe move on to the next question, which was kind of the acting. So I'll read it out here and paste it at the same time. Where is it? So, where was it? Dragon's relationship with Khaleesi is so important. How did you keep them wild beasts while still needing their mom? And I pasted the wrong one. Hold on. There you go.
Well, I would say that a lot of that would already come in the way that the story is being told, that in the storyboarding phase and how things are actually playing out through the sequence. Unless I'm not getting the question correctly. But, especially in season 2, where they were still really young, I mean, there it was kind of, I guess, easier to make them look cute and babyish in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as Ingo said, we just carried over from there what we found out in season 2. How they look at Khaleesi and how they kind of, you did this wonderful shot at the end where she's walking away carrying the 3 dragons, and they're actually having a little bit of a cuddle moment and things like this.
Oh yeah, that was in one of the clips we saw. That was quite nice.
Yeah, and and those kind of beats of things get reused later on as well in season 3 after he lands on the boat and Khaleesi strokes him and things like this. These behaviors that we kind of found and established in season 2, we try to use again, like even, just to sort of stay in character and have them do things that we've already seen.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it just was a bit more, now that in the end of season 3 and 4 they got so big, like especially the bit where they drop the goat and then Khaleesi tries to kind of calm him down, even though he reacts quite badly. But apart from that, they're always very nice with her, especially in the last scene in 10 where they're kind of crying like big dogs for their owner.
Yeah, like I said, I think a lot of that comes from how the story's been written, and then how that story's been boarded and shot.
Mm-hmm. I'd say a lot also would come through. I'm sure you have quite a few facial controls for the rig, so I'm sure you can get a few emotions by like the same you do on a human character, where you could tweak the eyes, maybe the eyebrows a bit to make them look cute in a way, even though they're so big and aggressive.
Yeah, I think that's actually one thing that's really quite fun and interesting about the dragons, that with every season they sort of evolve. In the first time round they didn't have hardly any facial controls other than the controls for the eyes and the eyelids, and obviously the jaw and the tongue and the fire-breathing glands. But as they become older and their faces become bigger, we really started to add in all the facial controls that you would have on another animal or even a human character.
Okay.
Was it easy to not be off model, or was it easy to not be off model? Like, could it like, did you have too much controls, and could it be cartoony or not realistic if you could do?
Yeah, I think that's actually a good question, because if you do look at crocodiles for reference, they don't have any facial mimicry. It's like all very, very solid. And in season 4, there was like a lot of ideas to make them more expressive, especially from the facials. And to start with, when you hear a request, whatever, got this extractable jaw, or there was the idea of actually playing their horns. They can move their horns. You think, I don't really know of any animal that can actually move their horns. It's cut off the skull and it should be static. But then, we put it into the rig and we start playing around with it, and it actually turns out to be really cool. You can get really big change in their head shapes and their expressions.
I guess you pose them, you store the take with the pose ready. You're not going to change pose within a shot.
How do you mean you don't?
So you don't see the transition. So when you get your take, the pose of the
Of
horns
course,
and
it's
the
finding
eyes.
the right way of playing the horns, so they don't look like they're made of rubber or something like
Yeah.
this. You know, we're just going for like subtle things, but like overall, it just works. You know, at some point. You know, you try out different ways, and some don't look so good, and then you find the sweet spot, and the horns, and they've got frills on their necks, work really well together.
And when the dragons got bigger, did you guys have to animate like the spikes on their heads and their fins, or were all those dynamics? You know, the little spikes, and they have like fins going down, like they're.
I don't know, Ingo, do you want to?
Well, it depends on the shot. I mean, we had like a lot of controls on
Sorry,
those.
I meant the
especially last
scales.
season. Basically, we could animate every spike on their neck separately if we wanted to, and we had a bunch of dynamics as well. And generally, I moved them like globally, but yeah, like most of the animation you see is like of the frills and all this standing up, and the shaking is basically everything is hand animated. There might be a little bit simulation on top of it for the frills, just for context and everything. But yeah, most of it is by hand, because it's also like as an animator you want to have all the control, you know. Actually, I'm one of those animators. I want to give as little as possible chance to change my shot when I keep it out of my hand, which is usually very fun when you have to fight the sim department. But yeah.
So would you turn off the whole sim, or would you leave it like at 0.1, key what you need, and then let the sim soften the animation?
Well, this season was different because we kind of evolved. Like since they're in season 2, basically we animators were like also the sim department more or less. So we could like pre-sim the shots. We had a lot of control how everything moves, like the tail dynamics and the wings and the fingers and everything. And after the season, there was just too many shots and there was too much involved. So we split it up into like sim department and animation department. So we kind of ended up doing like pre-sim. We made it look good in the shots, so it works without the sim. And then the sim department put the sim on top of it. And then the supervisors, like Chris and Sven as well, they just went over and said, okay, how much, the balance between those two.
Cool. So just on the question just now that we're talking about sim, so you obviously have a muscle simulation on all the dragons. Is that the same? How much control do you have as an animator on the muscles? Can you see how much the muscles are compressing and stretching, or do you send your shots to render and then they come back?
Exactly. It's just because there was not much time. I mean, like in season 4, we were like 4 people animating about 30 shots in like, I don't know, a couple months. So there was just no time to actually go over the sim as well. And we we had 2 separate rigs this season because they were so involved. The sim rig especially, because at muscle sim, we had a simulation for the scales as well because they were so big now. So the animators, like I said, we just made it look as good as possible in the animation rig and just prayed and hope. Check the render once a day and say like, what is this? Complain a lot.
Yeah, but also I must say that the skimmed version of the dragons wasn't so far off the muscle simmed version. It wasn't like the muscles were turned on and suddenly the chest or legs became twice the size. We had a pretty good idea in animation of how the shapes would move. It was the muscles were used more for improving the skinning to kind of like get rid of like unwanted creases, I guess, or also to add more dynamic feel to what's happening when they move that mass of the body.
Yeah, I guess it makes it feel a bit more organic as well, because there's quite a lot of surface on these big creatures. Like would the wings be dynamics or muscles? because they do feel like very leathery. Or do you actually animate in between the wings?
No, not in between the wings. We animate the fingers, the finger joints, which actually takes a lot of time because they're modeled in a super flat way, and you know, just to get a nice wing shape, you have to actually turn a lot of controls. And but then the skin between the fingers is something that comes entirely from a cloth simulation.
Okay. So like you're saying, which takes a lot of time with the fingers, with the scales, like for example, the last sequence in season 4, there's quite a lot of close-ups. Did you guys have to really go in and animate the scales to kind of feel alive on all of them, or did you kind of have again the sim and then just tweak what you needed in a polish bus?
The scales not so much. Like Ingo said, the frills on the back and the spikes on the back, that was something that we had control over. Also the, you know, at the tip of the tails, they've got another set of fins that could be animated. But I don't know, I guess you're talking about the shots where Khaleesi is putting on the chains onto the dragons.
Yeah, in fact, yeah, in that shot where she puts the chain on, that goes really close up and you can see all the spikes kind of going down.
They were actually, I would say, % hand animation, and then a little bit of extra collisions came from the fin department. Yeah.
Cool.
But most of it was hand animated.
I don't know if anyone has any more questions before we move.
Oh, Matt, we should tackle the animation workflow question that you just posted before. Because I, for one, would die to know if you guys, if you go with a layered approach, if you step this first. Well, like I have no idea how to go about such a complicated rig like that. So if you could just walk us through the way that you animate this from the moment that you get the plates to signing it off to the sim department.
I don't know. Do you want to, Ingo?
I think we both should do it because we have kind of similar / different rig approach. But I'm not much for stepping, to be honest. I mean, I used to start out with stepping, but I didn't like the way, because I'm not a 2D animator, so I had a lot of trouble with the timing. And I went back to layered animation. Now that's kind of much what I'm doing on creature animation nowadays. It's basically I lock the rough poses in, like really slow, like really blocky, but not stepped. It's just all spline. And for me, basically, I just use the thing about the volume and the weight more before I look at the poses. So I took the hip and then maybe rough pose it for the wings and moved that around like a bouncing ball, and then layer on top of that.
So how long would you keep your keyframes on the same frame before you start shifting?
I don't. No, I'm really messy. But the thing is, like, it's in that kind of, you can't. It's just the way of working approach. You have to know what you want to do, and you play it as loose as you can, so you can always change without much pain, but also it's clear. That's the only trick is, like, I don't know, it's like stepped or spline, it doesn't matter. It just has to be really clear. So, and there has to be enough information there so that the other person doesn't like project something in it. So you don't get a surprise when you have like a dailies later on you spline it or something.
So I'm guessing you'd hide the wings and maybe the tail and just see how the upper body moves around.
Well, it's when at the beginning when I have like my first blocking that I show usually to Chris or something, it's pretty much spline already, but it's really rough, so I don't go in and do all the finger animations, and the overlaps, but just like the telling pose, like the wing shapes, how they would look. So all kind of graphical shapes that would change. General the beats. Some of them have a little overlap in there, but not as much.
Okay.
But you could get the flow of the shot.
Would you already have?
I
Sorry.
approach it more like with an energy. So I just try to get across. This is how fast they move. This is what's going to happen, and then I can later on work from that.
And would you already have like a track of the dragons, or do they place that after you animate?
What track?
The sound of the dragons.
No, that comes later.
Okay,
That's
so you don't have that
afterwards.
as a reference.
Which is it's kind of nice that we don't have to worry about the sound effects, because then we can do at least a little bit more acting in it. It gives us a lot more freedom, I think, which is also the fun part.
Cool.
You have some libraries like Flight, like could import in Maya or.
Pardon? What library? Like a pose library or what?
Yeah, some pose library and stuff like that.
Yeah, like I had like a couple like rough shapes, like a one wing flap or something. That's just my personal thing. When, for example, when Chris or Sven, the other supervisor, says like, yeah, this is a really nice shape. I want this is the pose I'd like to do. It's like a signature kind of thing. Then I store it somewhere, and so I can fall back on it. Or if they say like this is the fly cycle, we really like this weight to it, I just drop it on top. But it's not like I don't drag and drop. It's more like I drop it in and change it. Mostly, sometimes completely change the type. It's just more like, like sketches, you know.
Yeah, like a starting point sometimes.
Exactly.
But even that evolves as we are already working on the shots. You know, we're so hardly. It's not like in pre-production we work out a pose library and an animation library and then we use that on the shots. There's just not enough time in the pre-production. What we do is we do test animations for features that the dragons should have in the season. You know, there's usually there's a new feature being added, or 2 or 3. And just to test out the rig and give it a stress test, we make them fly, or make a transition to their attack poses and things like this. But even that, we only look at when we're actually animating the shots. We're hardly. I guess there's like a slight exception in the trailer shot for season 4, where the dragon comes out. Before he catches the goat, he comes up in front of the boy. That shot evolved very much from a flight animation test. But still, the test animation, you could say that was like a rough blocking, and from then it went on. All the time we had like 2 or 3 weeks until the final animation of the show.
Okay, Chris, so what's your workflow?
Yeah, I guess it's not, like Ingo said, it's very, very similar to how Ingo goes about it, actually. Okay. I think, Matt, you've kind of seen me animating as well. I'm very, I guess depending on the shot, I would sort of like go either with a pose-to-pose kind of approach or a straight-ahead kind of approach. But I'm always very kind of picky about keeping my curves clean and controllable. I really sort of like to know where I put keyframes in my rig, so I don't hardly ever go in and just sort of drag around the controls in the viewport and key everything, and then go to another frame, drag around all the controls in the viewport and key again. Unless it is a real pose-to-pose shot, I would also, start animating from the inside out. Start with the root and work out the timing and flow of the movement.
Okay.
That's quite an interesting way, because I'd say a lot of people would find it not messy, but say you key just the root where you need it, then you're working on the spine. You might go slightly off, and then you have 2 keys and you don't know which is which. And
yeah, that's what I mean with the inside out. Work from the hip through the spine, especially with the dragons. It's really important, because are spine basically. The necks are so important for their overall body shapes. We're always trying to go for a nice, majestic kind of S-shaped neck, and then it goes through all the way through the tail. And those are the things I kind of take care of first, and then slowly I get into all the contacts and feet and wings and things like this.
If I remember correctly, you also you can kind of already vision the way you want your curves to be, or not the way you want your curves to be. If you want to do a certain movement, you kind of already know the way your curves should be. So maybe that's why it's easier for you to work that way.
Yeah, I guess that's as you get more and more familiar with a certain rig or with a character, you sort of sometimes it's just enough to look at the curves in the graph editor and move the keys around, and you already get sort of halfway where you want to get.
I think that's just maybe a lot of experience as well.
Yeah, that's a lot of experience. I can't do that. I'm still like, that's the thing where we're both like different, because I'm more like in the viewport animator. I just key it all, and I don't mind how the curves look afterwards, and I'm just fast enough to get rid of it if it's messy.
Yeah.
That's just a different workflow, I think. Chris is very good, like he's deliberate and he knows how the curve should look, and I'm kind of like also there, I know where it looks. But generally move everything I wanted, I just break the rig and figure out later.
Yeah, you see, I work like Ingo. I remember Chris would look over my shots, and he just deletes half the stuff, moves a few keys, and the shot's 100 times better already. So
I do get a bit anal about the curves sometimes.
But I was always surprised that you knew exactly what you're doing. You just delete some stuff, move other things around, and the shot's done.
That's kind of the fun part, because like me and Chris are the opposite side of the spectrum, I think, on the whole thing.
It's always
like
scary.
When we mix shots, it goes really bad.
It's always scary when someone like that looks.
Actually, I don't actually mind what the curves look like as long as the shot looks good, But if the shots are starting to become jumpy and jittery, and there's lots of pops and stuff, then I look into the curve editor and try and figure out where those come from.
It's always scary when someone says, "Oh, let me see your graph editor," when you never looked into it till somebody asked you. Like, "Oh my god!"
What do you mean, graph editor?
Yeah, come back in a week.
It's a very personal question,
It's like being at the doctor, It's take off your shirt and let me have a look.
Yeah, that's quite nice to see that like everyone has different workflows. I know quite a few people who just kind of look at the graph editor like you, Chris, and just know exactly what they're doing. I'm very much like Ingo, where I need to see what I'm moving. But again, I think it's nice that everyone has a different workflow. I think that's what makes animation interesting as well.
Yeah, me too. Also with this, some people make references, some people make thumbnails, some people, play with the models. I wouldn't say like, any approach is better than the other. It's about personal preference, but yeah, it's funny because when I first started out, I was actually a stop motion animator, and there was no graph editor at all, and I was basically just working in the viewport, so to speak. I was just posing the puppets, and also it's very much like doing a stepped key blocking. If you do a blocking in stop motion, you just sort of go on 4s or on 6s, or before you start animating a shot, you just block it through. And so when I first started to work professionally in computer animation, that's how I worked there as well. You know, I would have keys on every other frame for my first blocking, and you know, then just over time, I just adapted to a different kind of workflow, and that just works for me at the moment.
But you do not work in step, though. You work right into Spline.
Yeah, as well. Yeah, I'm past the step thing.
Yeah, I don't know how everyone else works, but since I worked with you guys, I also stopped working in steps, because I did find that working right into Spline, you do get a lot of the timing and the weight in immediately. So I think it's easier to progress to like your stage 2 of animation rather than switching everything to Spline and all your timings off. I think I kind of switched.
Kind of annoyed me a little bit when I worked with step curves, that, you know, unless you actually key every curve, it's very deceiving when you then turn your curves from step to spline. It's very deceiving when the movement starts and when it ends. You know, you were looking at your step blocking and it all made sense and it looked nice and everything like this. And then you do the switch and suddenly nothing seems to work anymore. You can key every curve, or, you know, and then, you know, there's not that much that you can carry over from your step blocking.
Yeah, I guess it's good for.
With the spline approach, you can actually use a lot more of what you're doing in the blocking for the final animation.
I guess it's good for students to start in step, because you can really focus on posing and see what the in-betweens are really like without the computer giving you half the answer kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense as well.
Yeah, I don't know actually. I mean, I think of course step blocking has its points, but I mean, like, I think we should be away from it. I think right now step blocking is more like this. What do you say? This glorifying from 2D animation. You know, like this kind of thing. Like when you start out in 3D animation, they all say, "Oh, you should do step blocking because that's almost like 2D animation. That's how the old Disney guys did it." And like, we are past that point. I mean, it depends. You know, like step blocking, I think it's like a step of your workflow. But if you like really go for it to have like control of it, you have to step to like on threes. That's about the level you have to go down to actually like make it work in the production. I think you have to go like pretty low, like on twos or threes, to actually have like a production workflow. Because just in time-wise, it's just too much work to get to step and have it look good, and like on 8s or something, on 10s, and then the supervisor says, "Yeah, that's how what I wanted," and you spline it. It looks like hell, and there's too much time to like, you know, he could interpret into stuff. It's for me personally, I think it's just too rough.
Yeah.
To actually show someone.
I think
like you can step your stuff out yourself for you, but like if you want to show the dailies or something, it has to be really high. And for me,
I think
personally,
you should also ask yourself, what do you want to get out of your blocking, and what do you want to show with your blocking. And you know, really important part if you're working in a bigger kind of production is that you communicate your idea, what you're planning with the shot. I think in step blocking you can communicate nice poses, but you can't so easily without setting a lot of keys. You can't really communicate the timing that you want to go for in the shot.
I think we should have another podcast just on that. I'm sure a few people have different opinions on that. We might start a little blocking war.
Matt, let me be the devil's advocate and ask Chris and Ingo. So since you like the spline blocking so much, and you pretty much sold me on it right now. About animating in spline and see how it goes. But so what would you say is the bad thing about spline about blocking in spline? What's the bad thing about it? Can you think of something?
You have to know what you want to do before you start. I think, because it's usually a layered approach, you have to know exactly where you want to go with the shot before you start. Because otherwise, it sounds like straight ahead, and it's actually a lot, but you still have to have, I think, more control over it than in step. because the thing, those splines can run away from you very quickly if you're not like focused on what you're doing, I think. So that's why you get usually like if someone starts like spline blocking and then they just do the hip and then just do the chest and it starts like offsetting really weird, you know, because they don't have control over it. So for me, the way I spline box more like in groups. So I usually have like the whole body as a group, then the feet, and like this kind of way. So I structure it kind of this way, because otherwise if you go and fall in love with a pose or something, it will run away from you. So you have to be more like concentrated how the whole shot will look, and every change you do in a curve can run through the whole shot. That's the negative thing, I would think, that most people find really like frustrating, because you have to be more careful what kind of keys you shift around. And in step, the thing is just you set a key on everything, nothing will run away from you. That's why step keys usually is like easier to begin with, I personally think. So they both have their positives and negatives, and I think it doesn't matter what you use as long as the end result is good. It's just a person's preference for me.
I think they just explained to me why I could never work in spline, because I'm always trying to figure out my poses and my acting kind of on the model, and just, you know, just to figure it out over time whenever I go. And that's why spline never really worked for me, because just like you said, whenever I change something, the entire shot goes kaboom, and that's
exactly.
So,
it's also like you're not so in love with your poses in the end when you do spline, because it always changes. You know, for me, basically when I block something, I'm usually like 90% of the time I don't really use the poses that are in the blocking. They're always going to change when they start like breaking it down and polishing it, and sometimes the timing changes and everything. So it's for me it's much more like a straight ahead or a straight ahead or a straight ahead.
Would you rough in your initial poses then?
Roughly, but like sometimes, you know, if you work on you got it approved from blocking, and then you say, okay, now animate, and you go in there and start breaking it up, and the timing changes a bit, you know, because it would probably look better if it lands a little bit further along the line, or a little bit heavier, and that kind of thing. That's much more organic, I think. You know what I mean? It's like in step blocking for me was always like, this is the pose now on that frame, and now I'm gonna have to run into that pose. And for me, I always ended up having like a stiff animation on that, because I felt like I ended up going straight ahead over it anyway. So just cut that step out anyway. So I just go over it and over it.
I think what I found hard switching over, and I'm sure a few others did, is that, to say, for example, I blocked out my first shot, and then Chris looks over it. Because it's in spline, not in stepped, you are seeing a lot of stuff you didn't work on. So you might be getting a lot of notes on things you haven't worked on, because things are drifting everywhere. Oh no, I'm not saying just for Chris, but now since I work only in spline, I find that you need to put more time into your blocking. Because otherwise
I'm not so sure, you know, that's what I tried to bring across earlier. You know, if you are starting out on a shot that's more pose-to-pose driven, and it's not a character walking around the room and changing his position a lot, then I think it's definitely possible to marry both worlds. You know, I would sort of put in my key poses. I would spend more time on my key poses than in a full body walking shot, and I would just put 2 keys on my key pose, you know, and define how long I want to be in that pose, and then I define how long it would take from getting from pose A to pose B with a spline part, you know, and then put 2 more keys. I mean, the tangents are all on spline then, but you still got like frozen holds, so to speak, in your shot, you know, so like in a step blocking. And but the advantage is you can say, or you can play around with how long you want the transition from pose A to pose B. You know what I mean, Michael? Because
totally. I'm taking mental notes here over and over. No, totally, makes perfect sense.
So for pose-to-pose acting, I think it's it's better than step tangents to use spline tangents. Just key everything on frame 12. You know, do your 8-frame hold, key everything again, and then do your new pose on frame whatever 30, and you got the same thing plus the timing for the change from A to B.
Yeah, that timing I think really saves you a lot of time afterwards. So that's why I kept on working in Spline, even though you get some stuff shifting in the wrong direction sometimes.
And look at your graph editor.
I bought an extra screen just for that.
If you take one lesson away from today, it's look at the graph editor.
Does anyone else have any questions on workflow? I'll take that.
No, I think we're through with workflow, huh?
So, I guess so. I mean, what is your typical workflow then, Michael?
Well, on Penguins, we were working pretty much. It was pretty much post-to-post based. So you would hold a pose for it. You would work a pose, but you would hold it for quite a while. So my approach towards that was to get the poses in, which I saw in boards. So I knew that, you know, a penguin would hit a pose like this and then just stay there for 24 frames or 48 frames while talking and just accenting dialogue pieces with a head and with, you know, a little bit of just getting accents in there, but basically the pose should be the same. And then I would do what you did, which is be in Spline and change the pose over Spline. So I could see how fast that would be, and I could offset keys a little bit to see, you know, make arms or feet or head or something hit a different point, just to see that the transition works before I start polishing that stuff out. So that was pretty much post to post based, and I would actually cheat the splines. So you had the beginning of the pose and the end of the pose, and you didn't want it to be identical, and you didn't want the typical spline that goes like this. So what I did was I shifted the poses a little bit like this, so the hip would move forward while the spine would go back and the shoulder would go a little bit up. And it had to be it had to look good, but it had to be fast because it was TV animation. And that worked pretty well. And on Kung Fu Panda, we had so much physical action going on that that just didn't work anymore. We didn't have the poses that were held for such a long time. It wasn't pose-based anymore. There was a lot of action. So that's when I went on and did what Ingo was talking about. And I know the step thing where you really have to break it down to threes in the end to make it look good in Spline. And it was heavy. It was really hard. I mean, it worked, but just getting down to threes, and then sometimes you realize that you kind of had misjudged the entire thing, and it looked good while it was on eights. But now that you're breaking it down on twos, you're like, oh shit, I need to find 12 more frames somewhere between the punches. And I had guys sitting around me that were working in Spline, and to me, it was like they were talking a different language. I knew what they were doing, but I knew what they were doing. I totally knew what they were doing and how they were doing it, but it was just I could not wrap my head around doing that. And Ingo explained to me why that didn't work, because I was always trying to find the movement and the poses while playing with the rig and seeing what works. But if you work in Spline, you can't do that. Apparently, obviously, that was just the moment where it clicked in my head, and I realized why those guys were able to do that and I wasn't, because I never knew how the shot really played out until I was in Maya and playing around with it. So yeah, I was always the step guy, and actually, I'll still be. But the creature animation Spline thing. Awesome. It was pretty much, it was quite an aha moment for me right there.
Chris and Ingo.
Yeah, I think, like, you know, especially in Madagascar and stuff, you know, the style, the animation style there almost calls for it. You know, it's like really snappy, kind of close to nose.
Yeah, definitely. It was like even the transitions between poses. Sometimes it like you could go from one pose to another in like 4 or 6 frames. It would just be one big blur, one big smear frame, and that was the style. I mean, it was perfectly legit. There was sometimes the boards even looked like that.
Yeah.
So that was good for TV animation because you had a solid style and looked good, and it also saved. It saved you a lot of time because you didn't have to worry about getting, and it just smeared it all over, and you're good to go play the next pose. Yeah.
Cool.
And would you guys change your workflow if you're working on creature or human characters?
Not really. It depends. I mean, for me, it's basically if it's an acting shot or something, I do it like Chris. I would make like a mix between, so I do get my golden poses in there roughly and get the rough timing there. But I usually tend to switch to spline pretty quickly.
Okay.
It's just the difference between it's more like not creature or CG shot. It's more like between body mechanics and acting for me. So with the body mechanics shots, which has a lot of action, it's gonna be probably more straight ahead for me, where I just figure the speed and the energy out with just hit, but like a bouncing ball roughly locking it in. And if it's an acting shot, then I have to hit emotions, and I'm gonna go in there and maybe on 8s. There's like 10s or 8s. I have like my rough key moments in there that I can sell. But yeah, then I spline again.
Okay.
So the thing is like no one cares how you get there as long as you get there. And if it works for you, it works for you.
True. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I don't really have two different kind of approaches, you know. And really, shot-based, I decide on how I go about it. I guess one way that's really fun for an acting way that I think Ingo you know as well from Boulder is this you know, treating your character like a Star Wars action figure, you know, like you know, you just pretend like you're playing you're an 8-year-old and you're just playing with action figures, and you know, just kind of make them walk like this, and that way you can sort of like figure out timings and stuff like this with only animating one controller, you know. Quite often I would kind of set my legs to FK legs, so I wouldn't have to worry about the IKs, moving the IKs along, and just you know, figure out when the character turns around or when he's laughing or something like this very quickly with just the root controller.
Cool.
Yeah, that's also, since we both know Kyle Baller, we all kind of got drilled to this, and it really helps, you know, just to, like I said when I talk about energy, that's kind of what I'm doing as well. Like sometimes I just put a sphere on the constraint on the hip and a sphere on the chest and just focus on, select those two and just focus on the movement and just the timing and everything. But yeah, if you do it that way, you should know what you're gonna do, how the shot's gonna end up. It's not like, you can still straight ahead from like hands and stuff like this, but you should really have a good idea of where you're gonna go.
Are you guys using that layered animation view feature in Maya at all, or is that something that you leave behind?
No, I don't touch it. No, actually, I did touch it on season 4. I made, I don't know, I just made a couple of bad experiences with it, and now I don't trust the stuff anymore. You know?
Okay.
I've tried out the animation layers, and I've tried out the tracks editor, and we've come back to just having one animation curve.
Yeah, I think we both started at a time where the stuff was still so unstable and exploded in your face all the time, so we just kind of stopped using it ever since then. Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes, you know, like and also like some pipelines don't like it, you know, like it can have trouble if you publish a shot sometimes, you know, it's just, if it works, it's fine. I know a lot of people really like using it, but I mean, for example, I learned quite a bit from the way Chris basically uses locators instead of like animation layers, which is kind of the same thing. It's just more like internal, and you don't have to deal with all this stuff differently. So no, animation layers, I mean, they have their positive things, and sometimes if you want breathing cycles, something like this, it's good, but not really. And I don't do tracks at all. That's just
Yes. Enough said.
Yeah, you just really want. I don't know. I think it's really important to watch out that your curves don't start fighting each other. You know, I mean, it's you don't want, you know, funky movements starting to happen and it being really hard to find why they are happening. So yeah, it's, I don't know. I find it really helpful to sort of really think about what controllers to pick together and move together, and you know, and try and avoid curves fighting each other.
Yeah, so Chris, Ingo, how is it to work with like 10 or 11 different directors on the show? Because like from season 2 to season 4, you had like, yeah, a lot of different directors. So would that be a different workflow, different kind of reinventing the wheel all the time? How is that?
No, actually, that didn't have that much impact on our work because the Game of Thrones directors, they served more during the shoot and I guess in the pre-production and things like this, and they directed the actors. For us, the approval ladder didn't include the directors. We had the HBO supervisors that would give us direct feedback, and once we got past them, it would be the executive producers from HBO that would have the last step of approval, so to speak. So there wasn't 11 different people giving us feedback.
No, I mean, apparently not 11 different, but, you know, different one or for every other show or something. That's what I was thinking.
No, it was the same. It was the same guy in every season or per season.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Well, I think we just passed the one hour here, so I don't know if you guys want. There's a few questions which are more based on what you guys would recommend for people to practice on to do creature animation. Like one of them was, what exercises do you recommend? If there's an order of exercises they can do step by step to kind of move into creature.
You want to do that, Chris?
I don't know. I remember doing exercises.
Okay. I think personally, I think there is no difference between a creature animator or a full CG animator. It's just an animator. It's just different. You should be able to do both. So if you do bouncing balls, you can do it. It doesn't matter. The only thing for me, the only difference is between creature animation and like full CG stuff is the level of detail and how much you can change the spacing. You know, but there is no like one workflow that does make you a perfect creature animation. It's just like what people like better to do. Maybe what they're like better have a bigger talent in, but you should be able to do both. You know, there's no distinction. Nowadays, people get like hired, you know, for creature animators and character animators and so on, but you should be able to do both because it's animation. It has all the same principles. It's just the fine details are different. You know, the spacing mostly. But
yeah, I totally agree. I guess maybe we could add that because there was another question someone was asking. I would like to know if it is wise to specialize in creature animation.
That was the next one.
Don't want to have one animator just for creatures, and I think, you know, if you know you want to focus more on creature work than character work, then, you know, you should just start doing it and do your exercises and your research and stuff with more realistic creatures. If you want to go for full CP films, you just spend more time on acting shots and practice your lip sync and stuff, you know, which obviously you don't need as much as a creature animator, but obviously you need to know about facial expressions and how blinks work and all that stuff. So, I guess this is more a question about what you should have on your reel. I think it certainly does help if you have some creature stuff on your reel, if you apply for a creature job. But it doesn't mean that you can't apply for a creature job with a good character animation. It's not like not like a no-go. You know, we take classical character animators for creature jobs and vice versa. You know?
Cool. Yeah, that's a question everybody asks. I guess it's good knowing a bit of both.
Mm. Yeah, like Ingo said, you know, it's all animation. You know, it's just it's just, you could call it a different style, I guess. You know, to me, I think in character animation, you sort of want to have clearer beats and not so much secondary stuff isn't so important. And with creature animation, that becomes a bit more important, but you still want the clear beats. You want to understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's two entirely different worlds. More like two different styles of animation.
Yeah. Cool. I think we've basically gone through literally everything here. Reference, acting, even not to study. Yeah, there was one question actually that we missed. Did you guys have 3 different rigs for each dragon?
No, we don't.
So it's the same rig, just different textures.
The same rig. There is the variations come from like you were asking the questions from the texture and the displacement, and you know, obviously we work hard to make them look different, but also a lot of the difference now as the dragons become older comes through their acting, you know, through their behaviors and things. Like especially in season 4, where it started to develop their personalities more. You know, we have Drogon obviously being like the alpha male, and then we've got the Cream Dragon, which I always mix up their names with Zerion and Dragon. The Cream Dragon being, you know, not quite as forward as the Green Dragon. The Green Dragon being slightly more aggressive and nosy and adventurous, and the Cream Dragon being, you know, maybe slightly more intelligent or something like that. So when they're all in a shot together, we sort of watch out that they're behaving differently as well.
Cool. So do you all have manuals on each character?
Well, yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Did you expect that the show will be really great when you started working on season 1?
Yeah, actually, we started working on season 2. Season 1, the dragons only appeared briefly right at the end. When it came to us, obviously it was like it was very exciting. You know, I was really thrilled to be able to work on Game of Thrones. I mean, whether it's going to be really great, you know, you can't really tell at the beginning, but obviously you could sort of give your best to make it as good as possible.
Yeah, you don't need a reason to animate dragons, you know. If they tell you you get to animate dragons, you're gonna say yes. You know. Why would I say no?
I remember I got a couple of my shots sent back to me around the time when Game of Thrones came out, the TV series came out, and I figured before I start watching the TV series, I'm gonna go through the audiobooks. And so I got a lot of shots back from my director that said, dude, it's all good, but can you make sure you're actually hitting the sound effects? Because I had my earphones and I was listening to the audiobooks all the time. And I didn't even hear the characters closing a door or something that stepped on the ground. I was like, oh yeah, I totally forgot that. Yes, I need to apologize to my director for doing that. He never had any idea, but yeah, it's a freaking good show. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Nice one. So I think this is it. It was really cool meeting you guys again, and thanks for everyone for being on.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It was really awesome.